I think we can drop the doctor bit. I have one that I don't deserve. You have one that you do deserve. Thank you for that rather understated introduction. First of all, I know that your appetite for educational discourse is probably more than been sated by about 2 days of discussion on the topic. And whilst I have a rather long script, I'll bear you the burden of having to listen to it all, although I would like to touch on it. And I like to touch on it really without apology, because for me, as for many people, and it's commonly said, that it is the key to our future. It's the key to our children's future. And to be honest with you, as I will describe, I don't believe that we've lived up to our own responsibilities in terms of the development of our educational policy, generally. There's been a myth which many of us believe, and out of a sense of our own patriotism almost, we don't like to admit it publicly, but there's a myth that we have a first-class educational system in Ireland. We don't. And all of the objective evidence proves that to be true. And it's something that is therefore of very serious importance to the future of this country. We don't have natural resources. We have to build our economy and our future and the future of our young in a way which is dependent upon the skill set, knowledge base and so on that they have. So it's a key to the future of this country. And it can't be ignored. And I think sometimes, and I must say this, with some of the lobbies that exist in this area, people are afraid to debate some of the issues because they're attacked. And the issues have to be dealt with. I'm going to focus on the universities. But the deficiencies in our education system aren't just there. We have, of course, magnificent teachers. We have magnificent teachers in the main, and they should be very well paid. Nobody argues against that. To my mind, they are, in their own way, doing more for this country than most people do. Having said that, take our secondary schools. We all know this. We have a dysfunctional school year. We have less hours of teaching per child, than comparable states. Our performance is no more than average, slightly above average in the OECD, and the OECD contains some countries that bring down that average considerably. We have to be in the top quartile of education to really develop our people as they should be developed. And there is fantastic raw material in young Irish people. I've seen them, and we all know them, but I've seen them abroad. And what is the quality that they have? It's difficult to define. An ability to communicate, certainly. An absence of a feeling of glass ceilings, or any doffing of the cap, or touching of the forelock. A sense that they can do anything. An ability to get on with people. It is fantastic raw material. Now, I don't know why that is a consequence of our culture. But I know that it is a consequence of our culture. Because it is, in my experience at least, unique. And I'm not just peddling an Irishman's view abroad, looking back through rose-tinted spectacles. Because I hear it all the time from people with whom I work and who are in charge of recruitment. As you know, we're not doing well at school level. We're just about average in mathematics and science. We have issues here which have been commented upon by very senior people involved in inward investment into Ireland. Remember John Hurley saying in Google that they could have had their engineering centre in Ireland, which would have provided enormous employment and significant additional routes for their company in Ireland if the engineering skills and mathematical capacity here was up to scratch. It isn't. Now, we speak and talk the right game. The National Development Plan, 2007 to 2013, makes it quite clear that this is the vital component of our social, economic and cultural well-being, education. And I'm going to focus a little bit on third-level education. First of all, let me say that you need to be blind and deaf not to recognize the appalling difficulties that any government has at the moment in regard to managing our public finances. So we can't live with illusions about the availability of massive funding. It isn't there. Investment at the top level would require us to increase our spending by 47%. To achieve parity with Finland, which is, I think, number 12 in the OECD, it would be a 23% increase in funding, which is very significant. The core exchequer funding in reality is going to be significantly reduced by 24% in this year. And the free fees initiative, which the payment in lieu of fees makes up for some of this, but very little really. And the Irish University's student-staff ratio is 19.6 to 1. In Warwick University, trying to get comparable, not absolutely Oxford and Cambridge levels in the UK, it's 13. And in York University, the same. And Copenhagen and Edinburgh, which are the other two I took just because they've been referred to, I think, by the university heads in a previous article, is more or less the same. So our teaching ratios are completely wrong. And I think we have to do something about it. And I know that Hugh Brady, who didn't write my script, talked about university fees yesterday. And I know that it's been put to the side on the basis that it's politically untouchable in some quarters. It can't be. It shouldn't be. It is absolutely required for our young people that we're prepared to take this on as an issue. It may sound difficult because of, again, a mythology about the effects of, that would flow from it. And let me explain why, because I don't think we should be setting up other quangos or committees to discover how to deal with this. If you look at the British system, which I think is pretty good actually, the British system is based on student loans. They're only repaid by the students when they have an income of 15,000 or more, and the amount one repays is directly related to the income, and you never pay more than 9% of your income. Now, it's been established in Ireland that if you get third-level education, you're during the period 35 to 44 years of age, the likelihood is, the average is, that you'll have 59% greater income than those who haven't had it. This, to my mind, is pretty conclusive argument as to why we have to address this, and the populist response of simply saying no, on the basis you don't want to be in any way linked into a theory of fees for universities, is a denial of responsibility. Because, lastly, on this particular point, the British Higher Education Authority has established, since the introduction of the fee scheme, that there has been a significant increase in the participation of young people in higher education, and, I quote, a significant and sustained increase in the participation rate of young people living in the most disadvantaged areas, representing 20% of the people. So the evidence, and the need for bursaries and support for those who are unable to move from their local area, for an example, the cost of living in another area and disadvantaged in one way or another, is also dealt with through bursaries in the scheme. So I think we have to deal with this. Let me make another point here. And I spoke about universities before, and the Irish Times put up a headline following that speech that I talked of reducing the number of 7 Irish universities. I never said anything of the sort, as the author of the article agreed. Subsequently, it was the headline that said it. What I actually said was we don't need 7 full-service universities. Research should be tailored to specific areas, and instead of handing out support systems right across the country, because it's a political handout system, we should focus on excellence. And if one university has a particular excellence, then it should be particularly supported and rewarded for that, rather than having a situation where the handout is spread often to areas where research is not appropriate in the particular university or institute of technology. There has been real progress in this, and it's to be commended through Science Foundation Ireland, and now laterally, more recently, we've had the PRTLI funding announcements in the last week, which showed a degree of focus and specialisation, which I think and was the result of a robust and objective assessment system. That's what we need. No more playing politics with this, and take out the decision-making from the political arena and have it made objectively by academics, having looked at the standard of the universities or institutes of technology and examined how they're doing. We have to recognise that all universities are not equal and shouldn't be equal. Everywhere else they're doing it. Sarkozy is talking of creating a small cadre of the best universities in the world. The Germans are talking about the excellence initiative in rewarding particular universities who are producing the goods in particular areas. We shouldn't feel that everybody has to receive the same and do the same. The Higher Education Authority in Ireland doesn't formally award separate teaching and research elements of the core grant made to universities. Elsewhere they do. And this is necessary and desirable, that universities who are carrying out first-class research should be rewarded for it. In England and Wales, the Higher Education Authority in its strategic plan notes that there are some things that other universities can do better, and that limited resources would be better concentrated where they will be most effective. We have to be prepared to grab that nettle and do it ourselves. At the moment, it's effectively bums on seats that determines the amount that universities get. This is a ludicrous way to determine the core grant. It would, in the end of the day, result in a situation like that which pertains in Italy, where no student virtually ever has direct contact with a professor, a lecturer, or a tutor, because the classes are enormous, and the whole intimacy of the university education system is removed. So a national higher education system needs different types of colleges. It needs institutes of technology, and they can be the best in the country. Take MIT in the United States or Georgia Tech, two of the best third-level institutions in the US, and they're institutes of technology. Some here seem to think that the designation Institute of Technology is a demotion from the level of university. Again, nonsense. The reality is that institutes of technology are very important. We have 7 universities and 14 institutes of technology with a total of 165,000 students. New Zealand, a population of 4.4 million, has 8 universities and 20 institutes of technology. Scotland has 15 universities because they converted their former polys into universities, and they've no institutes of technology. But in both of the other places, again, the support system of the state is tailored to reward for the research and the quality of teaching activity that is conducted in the areas. In Ireland, the core grant per student, which should include an amount for research, as I've said, is greater in institutes of technology than it is in universities. The total figure for this undifferentiated funding is 710 million. It's about €5,000 per full-time equivalent student for the universities, compared to 7,000 per student for the institutes of technology. There's no rational explanation that I'm aware of as to how or why this has happened. In fact, I haven't seen it commented upon. But the conclusions, I think, to be drawn from this are clear. We need to do something about funding, and we need to do it rationally, and we need to do it effectively. And we have to continue with the sort of robust analysis that has characterised PRTLI recently and Science Foundation Ireland, but also transfer that to analysis of teaching and the capacity of teaching. The fact is that, as I said at the outset, our duty is to our young. And let me broaden, in conclusion, some of the things that I've said for the purpose of debate. If I look at the history of Ireland, the economic history of Ireland, I see it through a rather simplifying prism. The early days of the state, characterized by the economic war with the United Kingdom, an agrarian, agricultural economy, basically, was a period where Ireland steadily fell behind the rest of Europe in, for an example, GDP per capita, and unemployment and emigration such as that which McGill himself went through, were the order of the day. And there's no county in Ireland that has much greater experience of that than Donegal. And that characteristic of the Irish state continued even after we joined the European Union in 1973. We were, for the early period of our membership of the European Union, the only really poor country in Europe. We did remarkably well. I'd love to see an analysis of the figures. Maybe Joe has them. But if you looked at the analysis of the figures that were received, for an example, by ANCO, the predecessor of FOSS, and the absence of any real product from that funding over a prolonged period of time, you'd have to seriously question what we were doing with the social fund. I don't know what we were doing with the regional fund either. Because by the end of the 80s, a period during which I was in government, we were facing a calamitous situation, which we all recall, which was almost miraculously reversed over a very short period of time. And that reversal, I think, was significantly attributable to a couple of things. First of all, we began to get a grip on our finances in a painful way, having gone through agonies beforehand, agonies that we haven't yet had visited on us in this particular crisis that we have at the moment, which may be actually fundamentally even more severe. But we made, at that stage, the move to remedy our finances. The government did it only because I think it had the support of Alan Dukes, if I may get in my party plug. I'm still what I am in terms of what happened. But the important thing was that at that time in 1992, some of you may remember that the internal market of the European Union was completed. Free movement of goods, persons, capital and services at precisely that moment. And it was precisely that moment, because we were fearful that we were about to lose the advantage that we had given to two areas, basically Shannon and the financial services area in Dublin, which had reduced levels of taxation. Concerned that we were going to lose the right that they had to attract industry, the decision was taken over the coming years to reduce our corporation tax level to 12.5%, right across the board, which could not be described as a state subsidy, which the other two would have been outlawed under Europe as being the Shannon and Dublin. So we brought in the lower tax rate, thereby massively increasing our competitiveness by reducing costs in Ireland for employment. And as we all know, during the coming 15 years, we steadily eroded that by uncompetitive practices in public service and in the private sector, and by paying ourselves too much in the context of our competitive position. Now, what Ireland did to create this Celtic tiger, in my opinion, was extremely limited. It was extremely limited in the sense that it wasn't the result of any industrial policy. It was the result simply of the attraction of Ireland for foreign direct investment that transformed the Irish economy. And that foreign direct investment, particularly in informatics and pharmaceuticals, has helped us to transform the Irish economy. But indigenous industry, notwithstanding the efforts of Enterprise Ireland and so on, is still a very, very, very small element of our economic success such as we have had. Now, that inward investment has to be sustained by more than low corporation tax. It has to be sustained by an education system that doesn't result in the sort of negative comment that Hewlett-Packard, Intel and Google chief executives, including here in the McGill School, have articulated clearly and unambiguously. So this isn't an optional extra. The education system is something that needs immediate action. The other thing that needs immediate action, in my view, is the public service, the public sector. If you look at the history of the public sector in Ireland, we can look with pride on the fact that we're one of the relatively few countries in the world, after independence, that has had a rigorous integrity in our public service, which has served us extremely well, and an independence that has avoided political contamination in general, and has maintained the same public service throughout changes of government without heads being lopped off because you're in the wrong party or supporting the wrong party and so on. It's a tremendous legacy that we have been fortunate, those of us who have looked at it and seen it in operation, can look to with some pride. But there's no denying the fact that if you look at the outcome of our policies, whether it's our politicians or our civil service are to be held culpable for this, our transport system, our infrastructure until recently, serious elements of our education system. You look right through our industry area, and you can't but come to the conclusion that there has been a failure to grapple with serious issues, and that the failure to grapple with serious issues may well be the result, inevitably perhaps, of politics too. That the hard choices have been things that people have been prepared to avoid almost at all costs. And it's very easy for people like me to stand here and to talk about those hard choices, because you're not making them, and you're not going to be the victim of the consequences of making them. But I think now is a time where all of the political parties have to be upfront and in detail about what their policy correctives are, rather than having a period of continuing fudging of positions which will ultimately damage us all. I don't think there's any time. And I would put at the forefront of that an area which we spend less as a percentage of our GDP than the average, which is education. There are many other areas, for example, health, where we spend more than the average. That's not to say that one is talking about decimating our health services, but there has to be an explanation as to why in some areas we seem to have to spend a hell of a lot more to get an inadequate service, rather than other areas where we spend less than we ought. Thank you very much.